Oh wait, can you hear me? Okay, there you are.
How is everyone doing today?
How? I made it down off that mountain.
That's good. Did you find that time productive? Did you get what you wanted to get written?
Yeah, I got to a really good place. I think I wouldn't say done as in like send the PDF print it, kind of thing, but I got to really um excavate in the structure and then backfill and then put up the foundation. Definitely got the floor in. Second floor is in. Roofing is mostly done. I think we're now at the point of like, okay, let's wait for the first rain to see where the leaks are.
Mm-hmm. You didn't hit any like sewer lines in the process?
There was a sewer line, but Melissa and her crew kind of got to it so quickly that it's barely even. You caught a whiff of it,
Yeah,
and then it
yeah.
kind of went away, and then she kind of gave a wave from over
Patched
at
it.
the thing and said like, we got this, no problem.
Well, if you end up with any leaks, consider using a French drain. It's
Oh yeah, the French drain. I remember we got that into well, it was the house my parents moved into after we were all like out of the house, and I remember my dad just like talking. He's like, he had this French drain thing. The guy wants to do a French drain. Like, what's up with that? And he's like, all I know is I'm writing big checks. kind
yeah. I mean, it's just like a regular drain. You just have to roll the R.
of.
A
I thought
drain.
this was a euphemism for a project until you started talking about the roof.
Oh, that would be a
No,
good
no,
project.
it was a euphemism for project.
Yeah, that's right. It's all
Yeah, but
metaphors for like.
an intellectual project, not a house project.
Yeah, no,
Well,
we're totally LARPing there.
yeah, yeah. Let's do a project that we can code name French drain. I like that.
Okay, awesome. Deal.
Yeah, just start with that. Start with good project names, and
Project
then
names and the
yeah,
project will
mission
follow if the
names.
name is good enough.
I got a great name for a mission. Like, let's just figure out what the mission should be.
I'm totally down with that. So, like I do that with songwriting. You just come up with a good song title and you're like done. Like I barely have to write this. I can just like la di da di da as long as I say this thing
Yeah,
three times before the end. It's a great
yeah.
song.
My wonderfully crappy. Still think about it quite often. High school. I mean, we're all still friends. High school band. Um, I just remember sitting wherever we were practicing, probably Eric Bergman's basement, and being like, coming up with band names, and it was always like this, like so and so and the what's and the somethings. So it was like
Yeah.
we ended up being Monk and the Mangoes, but there was like Rusty Nail and the Corrosions, which I think
Yeah,
would
yeah.
would be good.
Yeah, I briefly had a band name called Bob Wrongley and the Failers.
Nice.
The Commemorative Plates was another favorite one that I wanted to call a band.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't the government do that? Like that's why every project is like uh it's not an analogy,
It's
but it's
like the
the
acronyms.
initials. Yeah, acronyms. Thank you.
That's got to be pronounceable or something.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Be indicative. There's got to be like, I don't know. There's someone in the government printing office who's like, call Denny. He's great at these things, kind of thing. Because
Yeah.
they're all pretty crappy at one level. You know
They're
what
all so crappy. When they're all spelled out, you're like, what? Why would you call it this?
I mean? Yeah.
I went down the acronym or the military uh, phrase rabbit hole. I didn't realize that SNAFU is a military acronym.
Oh yeah. Well,
Which,
okay is also a military acronym, right?
yeah. Well, I like that SNAFU stands for situation normal all fucked up,
Hmm.
Yeah.
which is like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, there was a time I was looking at old government propaganda cartoons. There's one, Private Snafu. It's like all during, Vietnam era. You know, you can't tell anyone where your spouse is deployed, etc.
Mm.
And it was just following this private as he makes all these snafus.
See, I always thought it was some kind of like military, ready to eat pasta.
Snafu, just a snap and you're done.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Snap foo, yeah. Funny.
I'm
Well,
just, oh,
who
sorry, go
wants to
ahead.
give us
Go ahead.
updates?
I'll go. Hey, Brandel.
Okay, great. Sorry,
This is
I'm
we're
making
back to the
coffee,
old
so
thing
I'm
now,
not as
Brandel. Like when you used to remember when you were, was it? I felt like it was when you were in New Zealand. Are you back in New Zealand? You are. Okay. Where Brandel would call in from the car because and be like, "Hey, is everything all right? Like, do you need some groceries or what's going on?" Be like, "No, the family's sleeping." So I just come out into the car. Like, amazing.
yeah. Well, Rex
Um,
is very hungry and letting me know. So
um, what's going on? So yeah, so I was up a mountain, uh, doing trying to well finishing this next book, which I'm super excited about, and just wanted it to like follow really quickly after the other one. I didn't know the other one would sell out so quickly. So like at the same time, it's like now I'm going, to
yeah,
printers
that
about this
was
one book.
whoosh.
I'm also asking them. Now we got two projects.
And
There's
by
like,
the way, well,
yeah,
treat it like a
exactly,
twofer,
exactly,
right? Treat it
exactly.
like a
But
twofer. Like you
by
get
the
the
way,
privilege of publishing the second book after the first one sold out so well. I actually also need you to reprint copies.
yeah. Um, so I was doing that, and then I just got off the blower with looking at distribution. Sorry, not distribution like book distributors, but like 3PLs. You guys know this word? Yeah, Aaron, you'll know it for sure. Actually, you'd be a good one. We should have a. I'd be curious about your intel.
I wish I knew more, but yes.
Yeah. So just getting all the numbers, and I asked the lady to send me a calculator so I could just kind of run the numbers. But basically, the book was the first thing that I've done. The manual of design fiction was the first thing that I've done where when 100, basically 99% were done by a place called OML in Berlin just to handle the shipping. And so because my intent is to do many more than we have in the past. So I'm not talking about like I'm not becoming Amazon, but like many more like drops of things rather than one thing on the shop every other year sort of deal. I'm like, okay, well maybe the best use of my time isn't sitting in the living room with reruns of Junkyard Wars or something playing while I stuff envelopes. At the same time, there is like a certain there's a certain zen that I enjoy of stuffing the envelopes and then loading Chewy the dog in the car and with my hand truck and going to the post office special loading dock area and being all like chummy with the UPS people and deciding in the middle of a shipment like I'm gonna start throwing in some stickers or I'm gonna do my fun rubber stamps in the envelope anyway. So that looking into that and what else is going on?
How was the
I mean,
writing?
that sounds like a lot of stuff.
I'm curious to know what you do when you sit down to write. What's the process?
Yeah, just sit down and write.
Some
uh,
people need a vista. Some people need an empty corner to stare at.
Did you come
Yeah.
up with any parameters for your
Oh, the parameters? No, not really. It wasn't. It was. I didn't really overthink it. It was just kind of. It was like a last minute thing to decide to go up a mountain, and then I just kind of was there, freaked out a little bit, like the first, I would say, like 18 hours or so. Which I think was just like adjusting to the fact that like I've really got no other distractions. I have to do this. And then also it was like uh it was cold relative to my experience of cold now, having lived in Los Angeles 15 years. And there's this ice thing on the road. It's like, what's up with that? And then there was the whole chains thing. Like they were like, you must have chains. I was like, well, I don't have any, so don't look over here. But then someone was telling me it's like, no, they see a Subaru and they're just kind of like, come on through, come on through, come on through. And then I went someplace. Yeah, so this is what I'm doing. Like I'm on Reddit, like Subaru Forester chains, and people are like, "No, do not put chains on your Subaru. It's actually bad for the car. Like there's no clearance or something." I'm like, "What?" So yeah, so then I'm like, "Oh,
Well, aren't they four-wheel
that's
drive? Isn't that the
that's
whole thing?
that's what that button is that says X mode." I always thought that was just, I don't know. I never hit that button, but they're like, "No, just hit the X mode button and it puts it into a special mode that's like chain like." And I did that when Chewy and I went down to town to see the one or two other humans who were up there. I was like, "Oh, this is great. This is I'm where is some snow so I can fuck around in it. This is awesome." But it was just like get up around 6, make coffee, sit down at the dining room table there, and open up InDesign and see where it's at. It's so the book is the book is it's not all. There's probably more told through text on image than there is in like graph after graph after graph of like exposition or analytic prose, which I'm really feeling that. And that's because the way, well, what happened is I gave that AIGA talk and I was like, I really like this. Like I think this is a good encapsulation in a 20-minute talk of almost like the why design fiction thing in a way. Like, okay, so you read the manual, but why? What's going on here? And that was to an audience that maybe had never heard of it before, didn't have any exposure to it. Some people did, some people didn't. And so in that, when I put together that talk, it was a whole thing because I was like, I probably told you guys about this, but it's like when it was like a nice, really well organized, like large event, and I went into. They were like, "We need you to come. This such and so time. Go to this room for rehearsal." And I was like, "Rehearsal?" It's like I don't rehearse this shit. Like I got this, got this. And I go in the room, and I was just kind of like, slightly soiled myself. I was like, "This is a fucking huge room. What are you talking about? Like this isn't one of those rooms with like 12 folding chairs." and the kind of crappy screen, which is like you're trying to get it to lock into place, pulling it down. I was like, oh shit, it's on. Like this is no longer, this isn't the Rusty Raccoon kind of back room with a stool and a brick table and my guitar and tambourine. This is like a big deal. And so I panicked a little bit, did the rehearsal or whatever. There's no and it was there was. And so the rehearsal is like, okay, well, what are we gonna do? And you kind of go backstage and it's like, what the heck? There are like 9 production people back there scram, and they're crates, like loading crates that you see like at a U2 concert with things with like jacks being plugged into them, and someone like on a walk saying like, camera 12, can we get you on screen 7, back up a little bit? Yeah, try it with the 5th. That looks good. Good. And it's just like, what the hell? It's like a whole thing. And so I was like, so I went back. I went back to my hotel room, after rehearsal. And there was no speaker notes. So like, just no speaker notes. I was like, and it's not, just even to know where the beats are, because at some point, you could just whatever. Your brain reboots and you're kind of like, wait, what was this about? And so if you had like see 1 or 2 words, which usually what my speaker notes are, you're like, okay, that was this beat, that's this. So it's like now I'm back in my room, never have done this before. I'm in OBS recording myself over and over and over again, trying to get, just essentially memorizing my lines. And so in that whole thing, it's like I really had to spend time crafting the presentation, which I should have probably always done, but I've never done. And so when I did it, I guess I just felt so I felt like good about it. It felt like I love this story, because I essentially, that might have been Aaron, that might have been the writing. It might have been just sitting in the you know, the Seattle Grand Hilton or whatever the fuck it was, in room 714 for 4 hours one afternoon, just, you know, just knolling the thing, just really kind of getting it down to what it meant to say. And then so when I came back from that, and and I got a lot of, you know, positive affirmation from people, and from some people who I didn't know, but are like are are famous, I guess, you know, in some sense within the world of like graphic design. They're like, hey, that was really good. Amazing. Like, hey, you know, what are you doing this, you know, in next year? Like, we'd love to have you come by, kind of thing. It's like, oh, you're, I've heard of the place you work at. It's kind of a big deal. All right. So something, it felt like something was there. And so when I was like, okay, that's going to be the next book. And I tried to start writing it, and that was just feeling so awkward. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, why don't I just take that presentation, make it portrait, just flip it over, and see what that looks like, and you know, and do it, essentially take the presentation, put it in an InDesign. Does that look okay? And then it started filling out as I really got into it and really started enjoying, like, how can I tell this story in a that's, it's going to go on paper, it's going to be in someone's hand, and still have that satisfaction of being just like a rich visual explication of, you know, this particular way into understanding and seeing and appreciating the value of design fiction. And then it became like in my mind, I started looking at it, it's like, okay, actually, I think this is a series of, I think it was like 3 or 4 books. And when I say book, I'm like just like a little thing, not like not like the, you know, big hardcover that takes 3 years, maybe 116 pages, and the kind of thing that you can kind of go back to, because it's visual and rich. You can kind of go back to, and you can do, you know, for me, it was just fuck it, this is fun, like playing with like visual puns, and really not being self-conscious about the design of it, just sort of saying like, I'm looking at that and I like that. Maybe come back to it the next day and being like, you know what, I like this better, I just moved that over there, and I put these 2 images in juxtaposition. So for me, it's like also just like fun experiment, without a lot of with a lot of sense of like just like fun, just fun, not taking it so seriously that I think ends up happening when you do a fully prose book. I don't know, the syntax seems a little bit weird. You should go back and revise that.
When you've got a bunch of text too, it's like every single time you revise, you're like trying to cut out 1 or 2 words per line, and you know, across the span of a whole book, that makes a big difference. So
Yeah.
it's nice working in a shorter format because you can just be loose.
Yeah, move quickly, in a sense, you know, not recklessly, but just it was one of my, you know, first or second order reasons for wanting to just become a publisher, is that, oh, you know, I was talking to a friend, Ed Finn, just to kind of run by him, like, what do you think? Like, you know, we did the manual, it sold out, and he's got a relationship with MIT Press, you know, just as a, do you think, you know, should I talk to them and that kind of thing? And he's like, yeah, I can introduce you to them for sure. And basically the conclusion that I kind of felt, he wasn't saying directly, but I've always sort of felt, it's like, they'll, you know, if they go with it, they'll probably send the book out for review. So now you got to deal with other people. And like Sartre said, hell is other people, right? They will fuck you up, you know, like inadvertently. They'll just make you second guess your instinct about what makes sense. And part of me is kind of like, well, who are they? That's why I never really, I tried, but I never really vibed in any kind of positive way at all with academic publishing. Partly because you do your time as a reviewer, so you get a stack of papers for the 2025 ACM conference on ubiquitous computing, and you kind of read them, and I think some people probably take it, they take it maybe too seriously, or they take it seriously enough, and they kind of read the things, and it's like, where's my cheese? It's kind of vibe. It's like, why do no way I'm going to let you get published. It just starts getting like all kinds of like layers of complexity and meaning, and then especially when I was more in that world, like in the early 2000s, it's kind of like the only reason that I'm doing this or would do it, or people, or I felt, I could be partially wrong, but it felt like because that's what people use to review you for tenure. So you have all these cycles of like layers and layers and layers of just so you can get yours, just so you can get that sense of security of like getting tenure, which you may not even get. And I always wonder, it's like, I got a blog. I could just publish on that. Like, I don't, and if the measure of like my kind of value and one's value and worth within this community, this academic community or community of practice, is getting into a bound paperback that's handed out to 1,200 people at an annual conference, I just saw this massive disconnect. Like, I don't get it. It seems very medieval, and I'd rather live in the future. And I think, at that point, the future to me seemed quite obvious. Like, just put your ideas out there in the world, and the value will come back. Like in other terms, it might be like, okay, so you're saying you're out of academia because it feels, old fashioned, but you just have to trust your instinct that it's not so much the institution or the the kind of social formation as like being a professor, so much as just putting value out in the world and then seeing what comes back from that. And it could be the kind of thing where it's like, I heard this guy on I forget what it was on. It was someone shared the On the Media podcast. I think it was that in General Seminar 26. So I was listening to that on the road back, and they were talking to one academic, and it sounded like he was like on the outs academically because he had kind of ideas that weren't they were minority opinions about the state of where the direction artificial intelligence should go. It was around the time it's like, it's either neural nets that kind of figure things out on their own, or it's the brute force AI, whatever that was, like in the 80s or something. And he was like neural nets, and he's got forgive the aspersion, but it's like one of those guys who's like, he's got just a suitably cocky British accent where you're kind of like, you sound like you know what you're talking about, but you also sound like you sound like we're talking about, well, I don't know, it was slightly annoying. It was hard to kind of listen to him and feel into what he was saying, because I'm just thinking, it's like, and so the question came up from that well, it must feel like you must feel vindicated. He's up by you guys, Dre. He's at University of Toronto, and they were sort of saying like, well, and so there's a major hub of like technology innovation is kind of centered around what you were able to create at University of Toronto. And I wasn't sure exactly, but it sounded like he had been on the outs academically, and now he's gotten his. Like, I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. And he got his vengeance in this life. So he's like, oh, it's very pleasing, kind of thing. So, so I think, and so for me, the read on that story was like, you know what? Cocky motherfucker, but he held on to what he believed in, no matter what anyone said. And he I'm sort of making a lot up, but you can, the narrative arc, right? There are movies that have this kind of structure where it's like, you're on the outside, and at the end, act 3 is kind of like, oh, you were right. Oh man, forgive you. Oh, you have to excuse. We just didn't know. We didn't see the world the way you saw it, but you're right. So it was like that kind of art. But in the thing I was actually feeling into was more like, you know what? Follow your instincts. Fuck what other people think. If you have the confidence to pursue something, like, it might end up being shit, and you might end up just kind of, well, you know what? I spent my life believing in what I believed in, and I feel good about that. Or at some point, people might be like, what people are actually feeling into. It's like, man, you stuck to it, didn't you? You stuck to it, and that's what I appreciate. Whether or not you're right or wrong, or whether or not your idea is taken up by people in a position at University of Toronto where they're like, I don't know, I think this guy's onto something. Like, let's give him a budget in the department and endow a chair. Yeah, I don't know how they make these decisions are made, but you get into that position, and so I think that is in the academic context and in other contexts. I think that's the lesson that I guess in the background, one of the reasons why I would be less inclined to work with a publisher. I guess people appreciate the illusion of prestige that comes with having MIT Press on the spine or something like that. I kind of think that's bullshit. I think it's way more prestigious to have like Near Future Laboratory on the spine. Way more.
Unless you need their mailing list for
Distribution, practical
Like,
stuff,
that
marketing.
would be the only compelling reason to do it. But if you have the know-how and the patience to get the stuff to press and then into boxes and shipped out, and even that, you could do that with like 3PL or whatever else, right? Like, it's no longer the monolith that it was.
Yeah.
So, but it's just like there's so many little pieces of production you have to get.
Distribution is definitely a huge thing, especially with books, because we get a ton of like emails in from small bookshops that I would love to work with. I just have no facility for doing that, other than it would just be management by emails and maybe a shitty Excel spreadsheet trying to track. And some of them want consignment, some of them want different deals. They'll and I could tell them, I was like, I'll give you whatever. I don't even know what wholesale prices are in the book world, but let's say I give them my cost. I guess that's one way. Just be like, this is the only way it works. And some of them are just kind of like, I just have a customer I want to buy it for. I just tell them to go to the website.
Yeah,
Or you go to the website on their behalf if they're kind of like, I don't do the internet or whatever. But those are so small. I'm like in between the mass market whatever the mass market would be for a book, for a kind of book like this. What is that? I don't know. 10,000 copies. I have no idea. Literally have no idea. And being like, that's a great run. That's great. You did it independently. It's amazing. And then on the other side, it's like I think in the drop mode. It's like, I know it's a book, and I know what you think books are and what they mean and their value. This is closer to the like I collect photo books, and oftentimes those are not mass market, especially if it's it's like, that's the photographer right there, kind of thing. I'm not talking about like whatever Ansel Adams, like that's all. That's what you can probably get any Ansel Adams book that you want, because they've been reprinted and they're probably like on remainder shelves at Strand in New York or whatever. I'm talking about like,
he has his own foundation though. Like he set up a whole business just to publish his own books. And then of course there's Aperture, right? And that would be the equivalent, or Phaidon,
Yeah. Rizzoli.
Right. Oh God, Rizzoli books are so terrible. Those are awful.
Those are yeah. My friend Kyle did his book with Rizzoli, but I mean,
I like they make fine stuff. Something about their.
Do you go to them and they say like, okay, it's $25,000 to do the book? Is that how it works?
I don't know. I've never been published by anybody else. I publish my own stuff. But.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's just fun.
I put an ISBN on the first couple rounds of the skateboards that we made, sort of making a joke that it was a book, and that it was sort of like canonical.
Yeah. That's like one of those fun inversion things. Like, here's the book, comes with a free skateboard.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
they have a bibliography now too.
Right, right. I know. For some reason, it's hard to get it to show up online. I'm not savvy enough to really see the whole thing through. The idea there was right to have it be like you could cite your sources. You know, like you could look up the skateboard online and you could see all the sort of academic research that had gone into it, and you know, you could cite physics books and urbanism and whatever, queer theory and stuff like that, and just be like, yeah, you could pick up this skateboard and skip going to college because this one bibliography would tell you all the smart things you needed to know to live in the world.
I like the idea of citation of other non-literary objects as well, because if nothing else, an ISBN or a DOI are unique identifiers that can be kind of referred back to, and so you can cite specific coffee cups, and there's some kind of global objective reference to that in the universe. That's a fun way of exploiting the system. It's an ISBN as blockchain or something.
And like, it's also especially important because when you start looking at the skateboard as like a tool, and you start like collecting information with that tool, it's important for the tool to be consistent, right? Like any scientific experiment, you want that control. And so when you can cite it, or like when you can kind of relate it back, like the idea is, yes, there's thought been put into it, but it's also like that going forward, it's going to have like this predictable experience, and so you can map your environment predictably.
Sort of like the opposite of like the always updating iPhone, right? Like your terms of service are constantly changing, whereas like the ISBN, I mean, I guess like you have a version number on your phone, but with the ISBN, like there's a, you know, they change the number when you get a new version. Not the same book anymore.
Well, in
Yeah.
that context, I think an ISBN would definitely make sense on your card collections, on your card packs, as an artifact. Then, is that something that so you got like Manual Design Fiction has an ISBN? Would it be possible to get it to make one for the sort of creator pack as well?
It's very so you just go buy one. You just go on, there's an ISBN website, you just buy a pack of ISBNs. They're cheaper the more of them you buy, and then you just print it on whatever, and then you just put it in the database.
Yeah, we have a bandolier of them, but I think you just. It's interesting. Can an ISBN belong to a grouping?
Yeah, you put whatever you want. It's a pretty neat. I don't know. The back end of ISBN is pretty cool.
Yeah. Slight mystery.
All right, should we beg some questions? Tiffany, how was your skateboard lesson?
Good, really good. Getting more comfortable. Still very wiggly, but because I'm starting like so late, I'm trying to learn both feet at the same time. So I'll like alternate. And I've been trying to like try something new with my switch foot first and then doing the other one. And I think that's also like cool. It's cool to be able to think through the process of learning something new and like analyze it as I'm going with like, I guess, a design mindset, but it's been fun. Yeah.
I had a similar experience learning how to ride with the other foot forward. I started like in New York, you know, it was like skating to class. I was like, this is the only skating I'm doing, so I may as well go with the other foot forward. And then, you know, eventually took it to hills and stuff. And it was weird how stuff I didn't know that I had language for suddenly started like coming to me. I was like, oh, I never knew that I stood this way. But like you start to sort of be able to feel like what's sticky in your system because you have it, you know, an embodied example of what it feels like when it's going well.
Yeah.
But it feels like starting from scratch, right? Like even though you even though you had been skating for like years by the time you started pushing around New York, like the algorithm kind of doesn't mirror very quickly, and so your brain takes time to reprogram itself. That's why like Yeah, I think it's easier for beginners to learn how to ride Switch because everything is new and scary and like feels a little off balance. So then it doesn't feel like dramatically more work. Whereas if you've been skating for a while, and you're like super comfortable riding regular, that discomfort is like really discouraging to like force yourself to engage with, which I think is kind of interesting, like about how people prefer to learn to skate.
Is it dominant leg back or front? What's the natural position?
Depends what you mean by dominant.
Um,
Like, you
Like
know,
if I'm right legged, would I put it on the back to like control the any of the tippiness, or would I put my dominant leg on the front to control the nose?
I
like
think
what's-
it's like that. There's a whole bunch of sort of wacky terminology that's embedded in it, right? People talk about being like, you know,
Yeah.
regular or switch, or you know, pushing regular or manga, which is a racist term for what it's worth. But you know, there's no dominant. Like what's weird is that like you turn right with your right foot and you turn left with your left foot, no matter which way you're going forward. Like there's a lot of like strange pressure points between like your pinky toe and the ball of your foot and your heel, and nobody talks about any of this stuff, but it's like it's stuff that's happening, and you use it all. It's just that when you're going forward with one foot, it's you just everything is switched, but there's no dominant, not really. And like your left-handedness or right-handedness has nothing to do with your skateboarding. And I know people who will ride skate parks with one foot forward and they'll bomb hills with the other foot forward, which makes no sense to me. I don't.
That's
think
interesting because
Yeah,
I feel like right, like if I were to kick a ball, I would kick it with my right foot. Like I'm right leg dominant, the same way that I'm right hand dominant. I feel like I would have like it's funny. I think about it. It's like I don't feel like it's intuitive. I think I would probably put my right leg on the back of the board, not having tried it, but
It feels a
Yeah,
little bit
so-
like playing an instrument where it's like you gotta use both like sides, like regions of your body anyways. So then it's just like feeling it out.
but then you become accustomed, right? Like, so I play guitar and or I play stringed instruments, and it's like my right hand is my picking hand, my left hand is my fretting hand. If I flip that upside down, it's like I don't know how to play guitar at all. It's the craziest, you know. It's like I would give my left arm to be ambidextrous.
Yeah, I wonder like if you were like a beginner like guitar like learner, if you just like kept on learning switching back and forth with your hands, would you develop differently? Like in the same way.
Yeah, you'd probably like play guitar like that guy in Polyphia.
And I never like the students that I teach, I never tell them to choose a foot or whatever. If any, like the first lesson I teach them is how to kick the board into their hand, and as soon as they do it one way, I'm like, all right, do it the other way, and it all works itself out, right? Eventually, you figure out, you know, I want to go faster, and you know, you look around, and see other people doing it, and you kind of figure it out. There's people tend to embed a lot of language early on when there need not be any. So, you know, trying to kind of strip that away and sort of destigmatize any approach to the object, right? Like the person who taught me how to teach was like, no sitting down on the skateboard. Meanwhile, I had a kid yesterday who was like laying down, stomach on the board, face like 3 inches from the ground, just like rolling around the blacktop. And it was beautiful, right? Looks so meditative. And, you know, there's all kinds of exercises that we probably wouldn't do as adults, but he was really looking cool.
That's how you do flaming bowling. You light up the pins with white gas, and then you sit with your belly on a skateboard wearing a helmet, and then someone pushes you into the bowling pins. It's like, I've ridden skateboards probably more like that than any other way.
It's amazing to see what sort of utility there is from like, you know, a wheelchair access ramp and stuff like that. Like people, things that I just wouldn't even consider as like pedagogical tools, right? The kids immediately glommed on to, you know, the single step and the single, like, you know, 8-foot or 8-inch tall ramp. And they do that. They sit in a little train and hold one another and ride down. But it's super generative, right? Because what you're learning early on is just like that vestibular sense of being like, whoa, whoa, you know. And that alone gets
And
you pretty far.
it triggers the kids' exploration too, because like you don't have to tell them that the ramp is a ramp. Like they see that there's a ramp over there and they go skate over and they're like, oh, this seems like it's gonna be fun. And then, yeah, they kind of push it, and then that gets them to test their boundaries naturally, which is kind of entertaining to watch.
Yeah, my big update for this week is I took a lot of the ideas that I've been sort of chipping away at in Trip City and had a really long conversation with ChatGPT and put out like 43, 45 pages of responses. Dre, shout out to you for the list of 10 idea, because that has been, I mean, you just get a lot done very quickly. Had a good time asking it like what types of information you could collect if you put sensors on a skateboard, and it was talking about like air quality and you know, the lighting in different places and stuff like that. It did a pretty good job returning, you know, a lot of the conclusions that we've sort of like poked around in the dark for. I don't know if it could actually tell me how to successfully affix a sensor to a skateboard or not, but it did a good job kind of like outlining the whole line of inquiry.
When in doubt, hot glue.
Like, we have the technology to do all of that. Like, the engineering can come later on that front. It's thinking, like, you just said air quality, and I was like, duh, but that's like, it's such an obvious idea, but like, it wasn't even vaguely in the realm of my consideration. So like, yeah, I don't know, that kind of, those loose threads that are just hanging around, I feel like it might be good for kind of picking a lot of those up. ChatGPT.
The sort of question that I was talking to Karn about this yesterday, but the thing that's come up for me recently is like, if you were to put sensors on a skateboard and do a bunch of mapping, like how would you make sense of the areas where there was no data? Like how, you know, what do you, like if there's a curb cut that's too dangerous to ride up or down, like what do you do about the fact that there's no pathways through that space? And how do you sort of like interpolate, you know, the absence of data as a data point? I don't know if anybody has any sort of experience with that. Like, what's the negative space of sensor output?
Yeah, I think that being able, it depends on what the behavior is, right? So if the behavior is that you're going to kick your skateboard up and grab it by the wheel and then step up onto the curb and throw it back down, I think you over time would start to get an idea of what that pattern looks like. And then you could infer that there's a bump, and all of these. So I don't think there would be negative space. I think it would be a drastic change in pattern that wouldn't be a constant pattern. So this drastic change in pattern would indicate something that you would infer, and then you could qualify that by visually inspecting it or having it in such a way where maybe some skateboarders are, because I'm thinking of maybe there's an ecosystem similar to like a crypto type of ecosystem where people who contribute meaningful data or help add meaning to the otherwise kind of crazy data are recompensed for their actions. So maybe somebody's got like a little button that every time they hit that button when they jump a thing, it's the indication of this button means it's a curb cut, this button means it's a drainage thing, this button means it's a very specific type of obstacle. And then if enough people hit the same button in the same data anomaly, then you could probably safely assume that is correct information. So that it could be very manual that way, but it fosters community, which is really great.
Yeah, thinking.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of the size of the corpus of data that you have, but it sort of reminds me of Andy Clark's predictive coding hypothesis, where you have basically if you have certain sort of conditions on a road, then you would have a probability distribution of crossings in different parts, and when you have notable absences there, then that gives you a sense of differences and variations in the characteristics of the road that you can start to draw inferences from. And so yeah, it depends on how much manual cleaning you have the ability to do, but once you have holes in your data like that, then you'll should be able to sort of develop predictable enough sort of understandings of what those holes actually mean.
There was a project that I saw years ago where somebody created a 3D map of street elevation using only aggregated cell phone data. So as people would step off the sidewalk and onto the street, and it was only using that data, and it created a very like realistic wireframe of a section of that street based on, you know, thousands or tens of thousands of cell phone signals or gyroscopic data, elevation data.
How did they get a hold of that data?
I think they either had a group. I'm Googling it. I'm trying to find it. They either had a group of people sign up to test, or they acquired the data, because I think all that data is being captured by Google anyways.
Yeah, actually, if you start using cell phone data, then there's some fun stuff you can do. One, so cell phone data, at this point, thankfully, you know, hopefully also Android does it, but Apple devices ask if you want to ship your movement data, and then so if you just but if you visit a website, or if you ask people to visit a website while they're stepping over a piece of road, then you'll be able to get the relative information of acceleration and things. It won't be world registered unless you're using something like ARKit. But yeah, if you use those kinds of things and aggregate it, then you'd be able to see sharp discontinuities in acceleration, simply by virtue of them like being on a certain web page, which is pretty funny. And then if you have other things that you can use to kind of locate and disambiguate their position, say listening to different ultrasonic frequencies, and using the microphone. Again, thankfully, you have to ask to listen to the microphone these days. But yeah, like you'd be able to sort of coarsely triangulate and start giving probabilistic signals. But also just this week, people published a continuation of the work that I think I mentioned here in the past, where just Wi-Fi can be used as radar, and so that you can do dense reconstruction of actually limb pose and position using Wi-Fi signals, and they've managed to create full body positions of people inside rooms with a relatively stock number of kind of Wi-Fi routers and repeaters. So there's a possibility that a lot of this stuff will become sort of trackable and detectable, like much better, much sooner than expected. So you know, think about what you would do with too much data in the near future.
Yeah, that
Do the people
Wi-Fi
have to have
paper
both?
was crazy. What about ways that people subvert that though? Like if I have magnets embedded in my skin, will that subvert the Wi-Fi fields?
Probably. I mean, yeah, like in terms of what, so it would subvert them. What in terms of the extent of it, it would probably just make it so that what you looked like was weird. And similar to like if you've ever seen like the thermal radar, the thermal shielding that some tanks have, they have like hot plates behind some of the armor that make them look like small domestic cars.
Yeah,
In terms of the thermal signatures and stuff like that. So like it might mean that everybody else looks normal and you look like you've got a giant fishbowl head or something like that, which would be pretty cool too. Unless you could
Well,
actually sort of
yeah, people
make
sort of
yourself
work to
just look like
subvert
someone else.
AIs, right? I think that could be an interesting sort of point of inquiry. But also, I know this week there's also a paper about, you know, how to Marines or whatever, like subverted an AI by like wearing a cardboard box, right? As long as you become an unexpected shape. So like, I think this could go fun directions for like fashion. You know, there's the whole kind of wave of like, you have to fool camera vision. So how can I do my makeup so it doesn't recognize me as a human, right? Like, is this going to move forward sort of for clothing in terms of, you know, and who needs that clothing, right?
Yeah, having CV dazzle and then having RF dazzle of a different kind at the same time.
You can do like an Easter egg for the skateboard. Like if you put the right type of magnets in it, like you could make it look like something else to the Wi-Fi, you know, so by the time people are looking at it through a certain sensor, you're like, you know, riding a rabbit or, you know, a witch's broom or something. I don't know exactly how high fidelity it can be, but this does make me think though, like just incorporating other data, other stuff that like Chat GPT delivered was like, you know, location of crosswalks or like, you know, traffic data, things like that. So, you know, if there's a curb cut that's not getting used in a high traffic area, you know, like you would, you know, at a moment where you would be in the road. I have this one road that I skate down where I'm like, okay, I would love to get out of the street right now. because there's too many cars, but the curb cut is shitty. And if you could incorporate things like traffic data plus maybe like biometrics, where like you can see my heart rate increasing as as traffic gets more dense, and then especially if I jut towards a curb cut and then immediately avoid it because it's actually not a safe one to get up, right? Like does all of that. I just been thinking about how you fill in, because the skateboard is not going to capture everything. I did not know that about the Wi-Fi radar, but that seems like that could really deliver a lot of good information.
I think also in like kind of a parallel thought process in the fashion line that you brought up about functional fashion, as much as there's like, it's interesting that if you're moving through the city, then you have these opposing needs where on one hand, you want to obscure yourself from being detected if like skateboarding in a certain area is banned and they're trying to pick up these skateboards and stuff like that. But on the other hand, like high visibility is really important if you're moving through the city at night, because otherwise cars are not going to see you and stuff like that. And so there's all these designers that are coming up with high vis clothing that looks normal until headlights or whatever hit it. And so like there's these two opposing needs of obscurity from the law or like from being observed in like an official capacity, and then needing to be seen as much as possible by other people sharing the road, because whatever, in most cities you're not the priority right now.
I like the idea of taking that to the extremes and having like retro reflective Vanta black, so that it's maximally like hidden but also maximally reflective, even with a sharp cutoff for when you have the exact configuration of things like headlights.
Yeah, there's some like streetwear stuff. I can't remember the brands that are doing it right now, but like a lot of streetwear and techwear stuff that's doing pretty much exactly that, where it'll be like a jacket that's matte black, and then lights hit, like a camera flash hits it, or like bright headlights hit it, and then it becomes like super reflective. It's some retro reflectors. I don't know exactly how they work. It's like a spray they apply or something, but yeah, pretty much that.
There was a brand of it was somewhere years ago that I was kind of following that did it. It was just like a running, and I think running kind of pullover or something. But I don't know if I was more excited about the tech as I was the way in which they cinematically represented it. It wasn't the kind of thing that I saw and be like, oh, I want one of those. It was more kind of like, wow, it's kind of, I love the way you told the story of the thing. Visually, it's like someone running in some mossy wood someplace or something like that.
I just finished reading this book that Julian recommended called Energy and Equity, and it talks about there being sort of a threshold past which you start to compromise equity in service of speed. There we go. It differentiates like traffic from transport, and transit, right? Transit is just movement, or whatever. Traffic is like congestion, right? But like transport is the way you move, and transit is just movement. And that, like, the basic supposition is that like above 15 miles an hour, you start to sacrifice equity in the culture because some people start to move faster, and the means by which they move faster start to impede other people's movement. And his sort of proposition is that a bicycle is the key to the kingdom, that it's the least cumbersome way to get door to door without having to walk or whatever. Like, I'm reading this whole thing being like, well, a skateboard's actually even more effective. But there's this whole question, like, what does a society look like that doesn't have all of these privileged spaces of speed, right? And like how, when the road is not there to prioritize 6 lanes of traffic, how does it look different? And urbanists are asking this question all the time, but I don't think many of them are necessarily saying like, oh, there's a speed cap in the city, because it actually is an unequitable organization of life.
I think it also comes down to more than just like speed limits and stuff like that. I was looking at this. I was watching this video about how Dutch streets, instead of in the way in North America, pretty much, usually when there's a crosswalk or whatever, it's the sidewalk coming down to meet the road, and that kind of indicates that pedestrians are taking up space that is meant for cars. Whereas I think it's in I think it's in Amsterdam. The roadways come up to meet the pedestrian pathway, which remains uninterrupted, which kind of indicates to cars that the pedestrian space is what's more important. So like um, more than just like speed limits and stuff like that, I feel like there's these little cues in the built environment that we can be using to indicate to people that what kind of transport is the priority, because like even though cars are more convenient right now, if we kind of have to add some like friction to using them to like remind them to share space.
Aaron, I promised I was going to tell you like what about my relationships with the book. So like for there was a like early on with my company Amada, there was like this whole thing about like 18 miles an hour, and it had been heard that that was like the ideal speed for the human to travel. But I was always interested, like, where'd that come from? Like, who said that? And it was I was like on again, off again, trying to research that. But I remember at one point I was like sitting at my cycling club, and I was like talking to someone, and they were kind of like, yeah, I feel like I heard that on like some CBC radio show. And then so it was like, okay, so that was like another little clue, and I just kind of kept like digging forensically, and I even someone introduced me, by email or something, to like the producer, or no, I found the show that it might have been on. Someone was like, I think it was called to something, I can't even remember the name of the show, and I just kind of reached out to the producer, who, if memory serves, like was no longer the producer, but was like, up in the I don't know, someplace, like north of Regina, just kind of like whittling wood for his retirement or something weird like that. And I said, like, I got this weird, I'm trying to figure this out. Like, I was like, well, he said, send me like a list of like all the shows that they had done, so that it's just like whatever, like 100 shows, kind of looking through, he's like, it might have been like, it feels like something this guy might have said. And then finding, it's like, could you just send me the tape? So it's like, it's just getting into it, but I'm feeling like I'm getting close. And so he sent me the tape, and I'm like, listen, it's like, and the guy mentions the book, and so I got the book, and then I'm just reading the book like really closely, trying to find like where 18 might appear. And if I remember correctly, it's been like a year since I or maybe even longer. I think it was more like 15 or something like that. And the principle was that's the distance that a human can travel. I don't even know if it was by bicycle. It might have been. It was a distance, not a speed, in 1 hour. And that should be the reasonable range, for, where you live, that everything you need should be within the distance that you can essentially, get yourself to without a car. It was like 15, it wasn't 18, but it didn't matter. But like the principle, I felt like, okay, I found it. It wasn't much use beyond that for the purposes of Amida, but it was an interesting kind of excavation to kind of go down that and just figure out where that lives.
Yeah, 15 miles as a radius. I mean,
Radius,
is great.
yeah.
Like, I think that's it should be more. I mean, I'd probably travel very little more than like a mile radius living in a city. There's no reason for me to go outside that.
Yeah.
Unless I'm going on some explicit adventure.
Yeah.
Um,
So
but I
that
think
was what, sorry, just to that's what ended up being like at the top of the, you can't really see it there, it's covered up. And this one, you can kind of see it. So like 18's at the top. And the idea was that you would, if you're going 18 miles an hour, like the speed hand, the orange speed hand, right? It's just going to be,
right, and then ideally
it's just going to look like that. And
At
so then
that
you're
speed,
like,
it'll take you an hour to get where you to the edge of your radius.
yeah, and it's just like, and the weird experience was like when I got the first B1 builds of the and actually this is the one, like this is like the first one that I got from the factory, and I was riding with it, testing it out, and you know, I'm kind of like, I'm all fucked up because I'm kind of like, man, this thing better work. You know, it's like millions of dollars just sitting on the edge of my handlebar. And I kept, you know, so you kind of like just trying to ride, but sort of look at it, ride, look at it. And I was like, the fucker's broken. Are you kidding me? Like, what the hell? Like the speed hand isn't moving. And then I'd slow down and it would kind of like, I was like, oh, it is working. And my reflection was like, I'm feeling comfortable enough in my ride to, you know, kind of like going across Venice and Santa Monica, you kind of, I mean, your head's on a swivel because you're like, anyone can come from anywhere. But at some point where it's just like, whatever, I'm just, my body with this beautiful machine is moving through the world at such a speed that I feel comfortable to like look down and take a gander. And I was feeling like, you know, that those would happen to be the times that I looked down. I mean, sometimes on a descent, of course, you like look down. It's like, look, it's getting higher. This is amazing. Look at that thing go. But most of the time, it's just like when you're just moving at that speed, 30 kilometers an hour or 18 miles an hour, you just feel like, whoa, yeah, I'm in this beautiful feeling of motion. Things are moving by quickly. You know, not so quickly that it's a blur. You can catch a glimpse at, you know, some weird thing happening on the sidewalk between, you know, two people arguing over something, or just you can see people, you can catch their eye, you can kind of look and give like it's just the perfect speed and effort, you know, because like you're just pushing just enough, or maybe even just freewheeling.
Right, like any slower and the sort of the minutia of the built environment or like the social environment start to stick out a little too much. And then any faster and either, yeah, you're overexerting yourself or it feels like it would take more work than you might be prepared to exert at any time to sort of re-enter a slower speed. Like with skate, I mean, I think of like 15 miles an hour, 12 miles an hour on a skateboard, like, you know, we're a little bit slower than a bicycle on average, but it's the ideal speed is one where like if you hit a significant enough bump, you could start, you know, swinging your legs and you would still be standing by the time, you know, by the time you slow down, right? Like if you're going faster than running speed, then you can't catch yourself. Whereas like if you're, you know, you're going to like, you know, 12 to 15 miles an hour and you start cranking, you can just catch yourself, no problem. I mean, it takes, you know, some skill, but there's sort of the classic like handoff issue with like airplanes, right? That like, you know, if you let the autopilot fly too much, then when you try to pilot the plane yourself, you're not prepared to do it, which I think is also like the problem with the electric skateboard, right? Because you're so busy just like being all stiff and, you know, sort of bracing against the acceleration that when anything else happens, you just and there's, you know, nothing you can do. But same thing happens with the scooters, right? All the people who like hit something on the scooter and they can't let go of the handlebars, they just you know, get all white knuckled and then it just rockets them to the ground. Terrible.
Yeah.
With your Omada cycling computer, Julian, do you know? So it seems like aesthetically, like 18 miles an hour, the actual physical device would tend to prioritize, would tend to force people to prioritize getting it to exactly that. Did you ever collect any telemetry to be able to see whether people's sort of increased time with it would tend for them to get for them to sort of center more exactly on 18, where, you know, in the past they might have been a little bit more, a little bit less, and that kind of thing, or talk to people about how they used it and what impact it had on their rides? Because that's something I've been really aware of in cars, you know, like Toyota Prius and other vehicles that have efficiency monitors. Like I suspect that it has a pretty significant long run impact on the actual behaviors that they're prioritizing in terms of their braking and acceleration. So curious as to like what the sort of implicit defaults of the direction of that dial did to people's rides.
Yeah, I don't know from like from a you know, general data analytic perspective, because we don't keep any data. We could, but it's just kind of like, man, it just sounds like a shit show. But I think, you know, for me, and you hear anecdotally from other people, just even opening up the conversation about like the ideal speed to ride. Because cycling is a funny thing. So when people crow about speed to ride, they're usually crowing about more. Like, check it out, I'd average, you know, my average heart rate was this, and my power, you know, that kind of thing. And you have conversations with people saying like, I don't know, maybe another way to ride. There are a lot of people who yes, they definitely feel into that. They're just not the ones who are crowing about their massive watts of output, you know, doing some hill climb or something like that. And it's great to open up that conversation, just to just kind of give people a voice, say like, hey, you know what, I don't know what you were pushing so hard at, because 18 was just beautiful, man. I saw it. Did you miss that eagle? Oh, you know, even the idea of like stopping on a ride to some people is just like absurd. But it's like, I would, you know, I got a camera in my roll bag or like slung over my shoulder, and you know, hell's yeah, I'm gonna stop if it just take it in. And so it brings in that spirit, you know, like, why do we ride? Like, if you want to, you know, if you, your ego is so delicate that you got to let people know how much power you're putting out, then you're riding a different way than I am.
Yeah, it's like a totally different ethos to the thing. I mean, then you see the same thing in skateboarding, right? It's like, oh, let me jump down something bigger, flip the board more times. It's like you have a higher likelihood of failure, which seems like sort of an odd way to engage in activity. Like, I mean, so, you know, some people just like want to fail on purpose, and that's fine. But like, I would prefer just go on a nice bike ride.
Did you ever see that? It was Jenkin, you know, that magazine, Jenkin. They did that. They do these
Yeah.
beautiful. Was it
With an M at the end.
Jenkum? They did that beautiful, like, I don't. I just love those, whatever that collective, whatever they are. They did that thing with damn it, who's the film director who did does the weird films? He did like the one with the bear guy who got eaten by the bear.
Oh,
Uh, what's he's a
Herzog.
German fella, right?
I want to say Wim
Werner
Wenders.
Herzog.
No, not Wim. I was
Werner
thinking Wim
Herzog.
Wenders, Werner
Yeah,
Herzog.
yeah, Werner
yes,
Herzog.
not,
Yeah.
not Wim Wenders. Close, but let's go. But they did this beautiful interview with him. I was just so taken by that. I was so taken. It was just this beautiful thing of like, and he's like, yes, but look how they try over and over again. And I think this is very interesting, this kind of behavior. I very much enjoyed looking at this. And it was just so nice because it was like this heavy contrast between the Jankum guy, kid, you know, young guy, not, he's not a kid, but, and it was just beautiful. It's just like, I don't know, we rang up Werner. Let's see what he has to say about skateboarding.
yeah, it's really nice when the experts come in and talk to the skateboarders about it. I don't think there's anybody who's particularly critical of the skateboarders and sort of like the mainstream, which, you know, that's a lot of where I'm coming from, is sort of like begging that same 18-mile-an-hour question. You know, is there a different approach to this that might be more welcoming? But the sort of, you know, the questions of like how failure helps the learning process and how it can make you resilient, I think are really great nonetheless. Like, even, you know, I'm not particularly inclined to care about a kickflip, but I do think that failure is important, and it's nice to. I mean, when I do it at schools, I think they get out of school where they're like, oh well, I have to get whether or not 2 times 4 is 8, whereas like I don't care if it's, you know, 6, 7, 11, you know, on any given day, right? Because eventually you'll figure it out. There's no pressure to get it at
Yeah.
a certain time.
Yeah.
I think it's also a really good like social exercise as well. Like, as much as like having to go out and be skateboarded and sorry, having to go out and skateboard means having to go out and be observed and stuff like that. And so there's this like kind of self-awareness it helps you almost like tune out of, where you kind of are able to, because of that flow state that Julian was talking about, it like you kind of become a more centered. And I think that that's like a really important exercise for a lot of kids, because I think that that encourages a kind of like confidence that is difficult to find, just because like skateboarding in public is inherently performative, like, unfortunately, I think.
Yeah, I think so. So I'm sort of split on your point, Aaron, with regard to skateboarding. I guess I'm gonna, you know, kind of happily contradict myself, because when I was like shooting skate a lot, I was just hanging out with I was like felonious adult supervision, jumping fences, which I guess I could have got done for if they were like under 18. They wouldn't have. You're just looking for the, it was partially the trick. I definitely wasn't like, encouraging or hoping or looking for someone to like break themselves. Literally, I was just looking for more like the subtle beauty and just like the front side Smith grind in some dingy backyard pool. Like that's what I was looking for. But there was a thing where it's just like, I guess, yeah, maybe I'm not contradicting myself, because I was looking for beauty and form. I was less interested, except in a kind of squeamish way, of watching, like Jaws do like a 32 stare and just kind of, just fall on the banister in that awkward, very squeamish kind of way. It makes you pull your knees close together. Yeah. So
I've often sort of differentiated, like there's skateboarding where like you go there to do it, and then there's skateboarding where you do it to go there, or maybe like or like go somewhere to do it versus do it to go somewhere. Like so, skateboard as transit is just like it's just a means to an end. Whereas to go to that backyard pool, like you had to drive to that backyard pool. It's probably not the case that you rode the skateboard that you rode in the pool to the pool.
right. No, they call up Julian and they said like, pick me up and can you grab a grab me lunch at McDonald's on your way over here, kind of thing.
So it ends up being sort of like it's an extension of like spectacle production. Like it's fun, right? It's definitely fun to sort of interrogate that edge of like success and failure, but it's not especially utilitarian, so it's
Yes.
and like the majority of skateboarding centers around that sort of non-utilitarian pursuit.
Yeah, and I think that was the thing that, I think, if I remember correctly, the Werner Herzog thing that he was really focused, that ended up in my mind, what he was saying got focused on. It's like you're doing it, and once you've got it done, and after you all the repetition videos, we see boom, 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 boom. Okay, now look, this is where he smashes his skateboard in frustration and kind of just storms off, balled up fists, and then coming back, boom, boom, look, and then he got it. And that was it. And now it's done, like, and I don't know, maybe he'll do it again, but probably not. Or she.
Right. And like,
and I think it's amazing.
I think it's amazing. And also I don't relate to it.
Yeah, totally.
Right? Like
totally got it.
It's sort of, it's like this very strange sort of like hero's journey type thing where I'm just like, it's not relevant to me.
Yeah. And I think that's the kernel of it. The kernel of it is I guess the bewilderment that you can associate with like, yeah, but I mean, that didn't get you a raise at your burger flipping job, did it? What did it get you? Like maybe, a couple high fives from the fellas and a reason to cannonball that Modella or whatever. And that's it.
I think there is some like unique reward to just like developing a skill. I think that like being able to, not that necessarily that, I think part of the issue is also that like that kind of skateboarding, like hardcore street skateboarding, is kind of what's become mainstream skateboarding, and that's a really like harsh style that has a really stepped like skill gradient where like you can't do a trick, and then suddenly you step up to being able to like ollie or kickflip or whatever, and then it's just like a lot of nothing until you can suddenly land the next trick. I think that like other styles of skateboarding, it can, like you were talking about like that mellow feeling of watching someone do like a Smith grind on a pool or whatever. Other kinds of skateboarding, I think, still capture that kind of calmer, relaxed vibe where there's still like danger and there's still balance and there's still all of these like exciting elements, but without necessarily like the just like the amount of like failure and repetition and injury that it takes to like street skate. Like even downhill, even though you have to be very disciplined to be able to slide and stuff like that, you have to like kind of drill at that. Every time you take a run, whether or not you do the slide, there's like some pleasure in the descent, right? Like there's some excitement that you get from going down that hill. And I think that like by that goes underappreciated. Where like if you want that vibe where it's just like people hanging out, you don't necessarily exactly like you said, you don't go to like the 28th step, right? You go to like a little local hill, or you go to like a little local curb. But literally yesterday, I was in the bottom level of a parking garage on campus with Tiffany was there too. We went out, she brought the cruiser and everything, and we were skating, and like there's like the section in the back where like me and all there's like a bunch of longboard dancers and we're doing our style, and then there's like curbs and stuff, there's people playing like a game of skate there, and there's people skating the curbs, and like that kind of environment I feel like is not what gets showcased in a lot of skate parks these days, and in in what the mainstream's conception of it is. Sorry, that was a little skate rant, but
It's good stuff.
Yeah, one thing I noticed was like there are a couple of people just like there alone practicing like one thing over and over again, really like in the zone. And it's just, it reminds me of, I guess, like being in a like art studio, kind of like we're all working alone on something but together, and it's like a really chill, like collective feeling. And that's like really nice.
I'm curious to hear from Drew and Florian, because you guys have both commented in the thread a little bit. Drew, I've been trying to think about how to respond to your scooters that you posted. The three-wheeled vehicles.
Sure.
I'm curious to know more about like why you posted those. Like I've been like realizing we were in a skateboard thread. I was like, well, I didn't realize how much I was not interested in cars until there was a car in the skateboard thread, and I had to think really hard about how to say something about it. So
Because I didn't realize it was purely skateboard thread. That's why. And so I extrapolated it to things with wheels and traveling in the city. So that's why that was there. But that's an interesting ethnographic reaction that you had to two vehicles. They're small vehicles. So
right, it was small, and I was like, okay, but why is this better than a bike? Like, why is this better than a skateboard? I was like, what are we gonna get from? I was like, this would be suck to get hit by one of these. That would be awful.
imagine that would. But yeah, that's I didn't pick up on that on the full thread for the for that portion of the Discord. So that's why that was there. Stumbling through the community, bumping into people on the dance floor, trying to figure out the moves.
That's right. That's right. Wait a second. This is line dancing? I'm over here break dancing. Oh, sorry. Never mind. That's all good. That's all good. I love that. I love that you're just kind of feeling around through it. That's I would not discourage that at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good because I'll keep doing it.
Yeah, keep it up, man. Keep it up. You know, earn your stripes.
But that's interesting because one of the cars was from the Terry Gilliam movie Brazil. What if all the vehicles in Brazil were skateboards and bikes instead of, and that was that dystopian future? That's an interesting thought.
That's a really interesting, even just like what do we call it? Like conceit, I guess. You know, if like if we got into the near future laboratory janky time machine, and it was a world of these forms of transit, like what happened, if anything, and what is it like now? There was somewhere, I feel like I posted it, and I feel like the book is someplace, but someone did kind of like a fiction, like a prose fiction, a story, or maybe it was just, there've been a couple of people doing kind of like very almost technical economic analysis of a world just with bicycles. There is a book, I know, I can almost see where it is, about that someone did, essentially ran the numbers, is what the world would look like.
A world of 18-mile concentric circles.
Drew, what was the reference to Brazil that you made? Because I've seen that movie a bunch of times, but I didn't quite catch what you were saying.
The little car that
Oh yeah,
he's got the gigantic dump truck and economics. Okay, that's
everybody take a drink.
It's another drink. But in that same vein, maybe I'll look for a meme of De Niro with his grappling hook zip line. Maybe that's more appropriate for the Trip City thread instead of the car. So,
Yeah, well, there's that NEOM project called The Line in Saudi Arabia, which is like 170-kilometer long city that's only like, I don't know, a couple dozen meters wide, or I don't know, not that wide,
Yeah,
but the
6.5 feet wide, just
yeah,
enough
it's like
to
6.5 feet wide. It's
kind of
basically like
get full if you've got a full belly, and that's it.
yeah, it's like infinite New York condo is what it is. Yeah, the idea is that everyone kind of lives in their tiny little respective kind of areas, and the entire line is supposed to be that no one is 5 minutes away from anything that they're no more than 5 minutes away from anything that they might need. Although there's tons of holes that you can poke in the line. The fact that you could cut it in half and disrupt transportation, but
yeah, there's a lot of people find that distasteful, a lot of problems, but I mean, if you extrapolate it to maybe like extraplanet living, and like in Mars, where we're living in crevices because that's the only place where water ice is, right? Maybe that, maybe it's an experiment where, we live in, or maybe we live underwater in trenches or something like that.
that's cool.
So it's an interesting experiment.
I like the Martian water crevice thing. I might think about that for a design fiction thing.
It's making me think too, like, when you think, oh, an all biking culture or an all skateboarding culture, like, what are the reasons why it wouldn't work, right? Like, on a skateboard, when I lived in New York, the only reasons I wouldn't skate was if it was snowing or raining. But the only reason that was an issue is because there were no overhangs, right? You think like Paris, where there's like, you've got like all the overhangs, like all the, the covered areas where you can walk and stuff like that. Like, there's just nothing like that in New York City. You can't get from one side of the city to the other, in a covered area. So there's no way to get around snow free. So then a bike was better. But, yeah, just accepting things as they are. I don't know. Like, I just wonder about, like, what's the design fiction of just like a street that's actually good in all weather conditions, right? Like, maybe we default to cars because they're the only cover we have from the rain. And what if there was just rain coverage,
I mean, at the same time, living in Toronto and having to commute on my skateboard, it has been both snowing and raining this week. And I've had to like skateboard around like to the bank and to get groceries and stuff like that. And so like, and obviously Toronto doesn't have like rain cover over most of the sidewalks and stuff. So I think even more than like building elaborate structures, it can be about like road texture and stuff like that, and making sure that like, oh, if it's an area that gets a lot of rain, yeah, smooth texture is good, but you don't want it completely smooth because then in the rain, that's a death trap. You want it kind of like medium texture so that your wheels have something to grip. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think that there's like micro scale stuff that you can do that wouldn't necessarily be as expensive that helps you kind of weather integrate some of these pathways.
Covered
Montreal.
motorways are a perfect way to capture that space for solar energy, for a solar punk design, right?
Yeah, like cover the street with panels, right? Or, puts you lower the overall temperature of the city. You have some plants going from it or whatever else. And like Montreal has the tunnels, right, for when it's cold. And I think Charlotte, North Carolina has like a lot of connections between the buildings because it'll be so hot and so humid in the summer. You have air conditioned pathways between a lot of the buildings. But they're all like these hyperloop style things. It's like, what if the sidewalk was just nicer?
Toronto has the path for the winter downtown, but it's honestly like it's basically a bunch of like interconnected hallways and stuff, but it's not good. Like it's a labyrinth pretty much. And so like I don't know anyone that actually uses it on the regular. Like people just end up like that's where the subway becomes more important, because even though you have these like elaborate infrastructure investments, like ultimately it's like the bare bones necessities of transport that like the TTC that people want the investment to be in.
Karna, are you from Toronto?
Yeah, I go to U of T. I heard you were
Awesome.
working with people. Yeah, I'm in Toronto right now. I live right next to Kensington,
Oh,
like in
awesome. Hey.
Baldwin Village. Yeah.
How far are you from the old mattress factory? Are you in near St. Helens?
Yeah, sure.
Dre,
I mean,
Dre and I had a call with Patrick, who's also in Toronto, and I couldn't
He's in
talk
Toronto.
for
He's
like
in
the first
Bloordale. Yeah.
10 or 15 minutes.
Oh,
'cause
cool. Okay.
I was in the
Yeah.
car, and so I just overheard them doing all this coordination to figure out where each other was, and they had all these
Yeah.
like kind of funny, kind of Byzantine.
Yeah.
Is it the new multiplex condo building or the old one? No, it's the
Yeah.
one behind the old mattress factory.
It's the 90s cubist style. Yeah, I'm in Greektown, or as I like to call it,
Oh,
Geektown.
cool. Yeah. Like out west, right?
East.
Or east. Yeah.
Yeah, on the other side of the valley.
Oh, yeah, on the other side of the valley. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Way
in
down the food
Shelbyville.
line.
Yeah, I'm in
Yeah,
Shelbyville.
there you go. There's all your past Cabbage Town. There's one of your Byzantine terms.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
yeah.
Let's. There's a thing called the Nearest Future Laboratory, one of the channels, and there's a Toronto thing, so you should pop in there,
Sure.
and then
Will do.
And then if we have any like meetups, I'll let you know.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Thinking about that book, Julian, again, one of the last points that's made in it is he says, like, it doesn't matter how you rationalize the fact that a 15-mile-an-hour society is better, like that it ultimately has to be like a political sort of social decision to get to that space, right? Like, even if we're actually wasting more of our life energy to have a car culture and like working to afford the car, to sit in traffic and all of that stuff, like we have to decide to get there. So I've been like, that question you asked, like what happened in the culture to switch us to the all Viking society, I think is really prescient, because it seems like that's the only way you get there. Even if you do the math, right? People are not going to be pulled out of it. They'll kick and scream before they get out of the traffic jam. So, what are the things that have to happen to make people say, you know what, actually it is better if I get rid of my car.
Yeah. Hey, you guys, an operational issue. I just realized I have a call in 2 minutes, and normally I would just give Dre the or someone the steering wheel, but I realized last time I did that, and then I realized I scheduled a Zoom call on my Zoom account, and so it bounces people out. So I would encourage you guys, like, maybe just move over to the donut shop or in Discord. Do you guys know where that is? And then I'll jump in there when I'm done. I think it's just gonna be like a 15-minute call or something, if you guys are still around.
Yeah, I gotta bounce anyways. I gotta hit a recording studio and record weird shit this afternoon.
Near the mattress factory or by the old brewery?
Past the mattress factory, but I am gonna swing by Patrick's place. I gotta find out his 20 so I can go so I can swing by his house.
Yeah, make sure there's also there's some, I think there's some stuff in there for you as well, like a bunch of stickers and some of the
and some cryptocurrency.
Yeah, like a little grip of crypto, and then a bunch of these pens.
Nice.
Which I was going to ask you to get to some of the other people there.
Yeah, so yeah, I will do that. I'll coordinate that in the Nearest Future Laboratory as I arrange various coffees and beers with people.
Nice. Jealous. Okay, guys. So I'm going to bounce. So if you guys want to carry on, I'll be there.
All right. Have fun in the donut shop.
See ya.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Bye, Florian. Seeing you, my friend. We got to catch up.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.